Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Courtroom Confidential. This is our Monday Night Live countdown show. That's at least what I'm calling it for right now. We're still working on the name. We're not quite sure if that's too much of a mouthful, but I have a love for branding things. So Tiffany says, just say we're going live. And I'm like, no, we gotta give it a name. We gotta call it something. So I'm calling it the Monday Night Live Countdown Show because it's a countdown, a quick live check-in before we start our premiere on the latest episode of our Courtroom Confidential conversation series. Notice the branding again. Like I said, I kind of love the branding. But we have a really, really great interview tonight that was done with Joseph Scott Morgan from the Body Bags podcast. If you don't know Joseph Scott Morgan, I'm sure a lot of you do, but if you don't, get to know this man. First of all, he's got the greatest voice in all of show business. I mean, this man's voice is just capturing, and he when he starts to tell a story, he's from the South and he's got a way of telling a story like I've never heard. He really captures you, and he's got this wonderful podcast called Body Bags because he was what is called a murder investigator, a death investigator for a long time in the South, for a long time, and investigated thousands of murders and other types of deaths. And on top of all of that, he's a professor and incredibly experienced. He's just about one of the nicest, most kind and generous with his time people I've ever met. And that shines through in this interview. So that interview is coming up at the top of the hour. And you don't have to go anywhere because as soon as we're done with this, we've got it set to automatically bump you into that interview so you guys can watch it. It's going to be a live premiere, so we'll all be able to chat with you. And I already see some familiar names, Robin Hood and Samantha and Farm Girl and Shell. Thank you guys so much, everybody, for being in the chat this evening. But to have a little bit of news for us to talk about before we go into that interview, a couple of things took place late last week, not soon enough for us to really cover it on the Friday show, and then over the weekend. So first is these brothers out of Florida that are this case is now going to be referred to as the Alexander brothers. It's Alon, Oren, and Tal. They are three brothers. Two of them are twins. They are in their late 30s, and they are big time celebrity type real estate agents, brokers, whatever you want to call them. But I'm not talking like sell you or I a house. I'm talking about hedge fund managers and superstar athletes and celebrities. That's who they cater to. Well, they got indicted. They got indicted federally for some real bad business. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but it is sex-related crime. So I will warn you guys ahead of time. I'll get into what's in the indictment. It's not entirely graphic, but graphic enough. I'll just put it that way. And I'll try to watch my language too, so that the YouTube gods shine brightly upon us. And then also, kind of on the flip side, and helping us understand just how difficult these types of cases are with these types of allegations of assault. There's news on the Jay-Z front where the alleged victim in that civil lawsuit against him has had to correct herself on some things, and we'll break that down. She did an interview with NBC, still has not disclosed her identity. She was had her identity hidden, and I believe even her voice changed when she did the interview. But some interesting things, and I'm going to try to leave the judgment on that up to you guys. But some interesting things came out in that interview that I think is important for us to talk about because, I think, like I said, it highlights the difficulty of these types of cases. But before we get into all of that, in the worst segue of all history, we have an exciting announcement, and that is that we have launched our shop, our merch department. And so just in time for the holidays, you can buy all your loved ones and family some Courtroom Confidential merch. So I'm just going to show you guys that really quickly because we're really proud of it. It's not a lot of stuff, but we worked hard at it, and it was difficult getting this all together for you folks. But we wanted to make sure that you had at least something before the end of the year. So here is the Courtroom Confidential YouTube page. If you click on the store tab, you can see we've got shirts and hats and mugs. And this tumbler right here is one of my favorite. I've got it. It's got the raised lettering on it, really nicely done. We spent a lot of time on this because we didn't want to just rush something out that would be subpar. That would be something that we wouldn't be happy to give to one of our own friends or family. So even this beanie's cool. I got that for the girls and they love wearing it. The other place you can find it is if you go to the Courtroom Confidential website. Did you know we had a website? We haven't talked enough about it, but it is thecourtroomconfidential.com. You will see this gentleman here staring at you, trying to puff up his arms like he works out enough, which he does not. If you click on the shop tab again, you can that's another way to access everything that we're offering. We're going to try to offer more as the channel grows and everything else, but this was our just kind of a little thank you to everyone in the community and in our family that we could all share being part of the crew together. So please check that out, you guys. Also, we'll put links in the description of this video, and I think Kaylin or Tiffany's going to throw a link in the chat. So let's dive into the escapades, the misadventures of the Alexander brothers. As I said, these are three brothers. I won't go into a whole bunch of like their history, but it really is a fascinating story. Their family came over from Israel. Their father had not even two nickels to rub together, built this kind of an empire. The sons kind of took it over, but also built something of their own. And there's two twins, Oren and Alon, are twins, and they are 37 years old. I'm just trying to pull this up for you guys. Yeah, okay. Oren and Alon, the top two there, are 37 years old. Then their older brother, Tal, is 38. So he's even basically a triplet of the three of them. They're young men. They're all incredibly successful. They're all incredibly wealthy. And as you can see here, this is the superseding indictment that was filed last week with a federal grand jury, finding them, charging them with three different counts. The first here, as you can see on the page, is for sex trafficking. The second is for sex trafficking of a named victim, and the third is for a named, not named, but identified victim, whereas this is conspiracy to commit in count one. Putting all of the getting into the weeds aside of what they are charged with, it's life exposure. This is as bad as it can get, okay? As far as allegations of the federal charges that can be brought on allegations of any kind of sexual assault. And the most recent news, and why we kind of wanted to talk about it today, and the rug got pulled out underneath us, but they were supposed to be in court, Oren and Alon, for a bail hearing, but that has been reset to Thursday. But it is likely they are not going anywhere because the oldest brother, Tal, has already been denied bail by a federal judge. The two younger brothers were actually granted bail by a state judge. But because a federal judge is likely not going to allow them all to be handled differently, it is highly likely that both Oren and Alon will be denied bail on the federal level. So it doesn't matter what happened on the state level. They're all going to stay in federal prison. By the way, beginning to sound familiar to a person named P. Diddy, you cross paths with the federal government, you are likely going to stay in prison during the pendency of your trial. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. They put up multi-million-dollar sureties on the state level. I don't think that's going to buy them a day out of jail on the federal level. And part of that, if you want to call it ironic or not, has to do with how wealthy they are, that they have the means to hop on a private plane and go to somewhere like Israel, where they have ties and where it will be unlikely to impossible to actually extradite them. And given the overall history of coercion, use of their own power, all of these types of things, which, again, sound familiar, is exactly why P. Diddy continues to remain in federal jail and why he will likely stay there until his trial, and why what he is looking at is just as serious as what these brothers are looking at. And in fact, what the brothers are looking at, you could argue might even be worse. So let's go a little bit into that right now. I want to try to do this. How can I do this that looks the best for you guys to look at it? There. Okay. A federal indictment, if it's written well, will always have basically everything you need to know as far as the story goes in paragraph number 1. Paragraph number 1 says, for well over a decade, already something that's interesting. For over a decade, these guys are 37 years old. You're talking about when they were in their mid-20s, they had been operating this way, according to what we're about to find out. The defendants work together and with others, known and unknown. Whenever you see with others, known and unknown, what that means is that the federal investigation is not done, that there are more people involved. They are being charged with conspiracy here, and I only see the United States versus 3 different people. There are other men, individuals, women out there who are cooperating with the government. I can bet my bottom dollar that is exactly what's happening, and they will continue to cooperate with the federal government if they don't want to end up on the other side of this U.S. versus. They're going to continue to cooperate with the federal government. The Alexander brothers arranged for these sexual assaults well in advance, using the promise of luxury experiences, travel, and accommodations to lure and entice women to locations where they were then forcibly raped or sexually assaulted, sometimes by multiple men, including one or more of the Alexander brothers. Other times, the Alexander brothers encountered and chose their victims by chance. So these guys were all over the map. And I highlight the idea of forcibly, because what they go on to describe in here is coercion, power tripping, use of drugs, but also just flat out holding somebody down and assaulting them. As bad as it could possibly get, like I said. And to kind of put a fine point on it, often the Alexander brothers drugged their victims before assaulting them, preventing them from fighting back or escaping. So, like I said, you can basically read paragraph 1 of a well-written federal indictment and get everything that you need out of it. But let's go to some of the highlights. I read through this thing today. Paragraph number 5 says, thereafter, no, I can't highlight this. Thereafter, the Alexander brothers used various methods, including drugging the victims and at times physical force, to assault the victims, sometimes alone, sometimes together, using means and methods, among others, to carry out their trafficking scheme. Paragraph then they go on to describe that scheme here. In paragraph C, this was, I thought, interesting. The last sentence here. Immediately following the assaults, the defendants sometimes offered the victims material items, including travel, concert tickets, and luxury experiences. So it was like the bribing began by getting the girls with this idea of material items, luxury travel, concert tickets, experiences, access to celebrities and sports stars, I'm sure. And then it continued afterwards too, in order to have them keep their mouths shut. And again, this is how, does it remind you of someone that we're also talking about this evening? This is how the rich and famous got their way for decades upon decades. And now, in large part to what is happening out of the Southern District of New York, that's all coming to an end. That's something I should point out too. This is the same federal prosecutor and office filing these charges, the Southern District of New York, that has currently P. Diddy in custody. So this Southern District of New York, you may have heard of that before, does not play. They do not mess around. If they are coming after you, it's essentially the Top Gun of the U.S. Attorney's Office coming after you. Paragraph D, the defendants at times with others shared, and this is the part that when you realize the just acting with zero fear, total disregard, and almost flaunting of their behavior. These defendants at times with others shared photographs of women to select those they found sufficiently attractive to invite. So the federal government has a cache of photographs and text messages. Paragraph F, Alexander Brothers transported women and caused women to be transported across state and international lines. That is why this is a federal case. There's also two state cases against these gentlemen. So Florida was going to have their piece of the pie as well, but the federal government got involved in large part because of this transportation trafficking issue with transportation across state and international lines. Paragraph G, the Alexander Brothers and others procured drugs that they agreed to provide to the women, including, among other things, cocaine, mushrooms, and GHB. Again, sound familiar to the behavior of anybody else we've been talking about recently. The brothers surreptitiously drugged women's drinks. Some of the victims experienced symptoms of impaired physical and mental capacity, including limitations of movement and speech, and incomplete memories of events. Again, for a decade, they had been behaving this way, just with impunity. That was the word I was looking for before. These people and their power trip and the ability from the lessons they learned of how long they got away with it. You think you get away with this the first or second time, they start to believe that they are untouchable. And by year number 3, 4, 5, 6, they feel like there's never anyone going to come knocking on their door. 10 years they had been operating this way. Paragraph number H, they forcibly assaulted their victims. At times, defendants physically restrained and held down their victims during these assaults and ignored screams and explicit requests to stop. That, when I read that, was the part that I felt, you know what, this stands out a little bit even from what I think we saw in the Diddy case. Well, actually, that's not true, because the allegations, at least in the civil suit against Jay-Z and Diddy, involve some sort of physical restraint. So, just mind-blowing, like I said, and thank you so much, Jody, just mind-blowing, the impunity, the complete... I hope I'm translating this right. The complete lack of concern for ever looking over their shoulder. You don't operate this way, physically assaulting, drugging, all of this type of stuff for 10 years if you feel like you're worried about the government walking around the corner. And they had jobs making millions upon millions of dollars a year. Thank you so much, Robin. Knowing how people that put them in front of the gossip pages. I mean, what I'm saying is they're not operating in the shadows. These are people who for decades had been rubbing elbows with the rich and famous, and they were acting this way behind the scenes. And as you are beginning to find out from all of this, there are many, many other people involved, because they were sending text messages and other types of communication with each other. And that brings me kind of to my last point on this and why I wanted to then segue into our other case for the last few minutes that we have left. The evidence in this case that we're beginning to find out, I think, is going to be eventually overwhelming. We are talking text messages where they're talking about the trafficking, videos, photos, testimony of nearly 40 different women who apparently have no connection to each other. That is a very, very strong criminal case and why we're seeing it as a criminal case. Jody says it's hard to understand how these visuals would think that one of these women were assaulted would not report them. Well, they didn't because they were afraid, and they didn't because they thought they were alone, and they didn't because they thought they were the only one to do it. And they, perhaps some of them did, but without a group of them coming forward with all of this corroborating evidence, how do you take down these rich and powerful people? Well, times have changed. Now, again, to show you how difficult these cases can be, let's take a look at a very different scenario. Jay-Z has been accused of something very similar to this. He's been accused, along with P. Diddy, of assaulting a 13-year-old girl, of holding her down, of possibly being involved in drugging her, of all sorts of very similar things to what is being alleged here. Now, that alleged victim did an interview with NBC. Again, she had her identity shielded. She was, I believe, had her voice altered. But some really remarkable inconsistencies, as they're being characterized as, were revealed. First of all, she says that after the assault took place, she went outside and she had her father pick her up. Her father says that he does not recall this. He does not recall an event where he went to go get his daughter, who was 13 at the time, allegedly, in the middle of the night. She has specific memories of this, of their ride home, of how they didn't talk about what took place. He's saying he doesn't remember any of it. And you could say, well, he just doesn't remember. But with the research done by NBC and the time that she gave and where they were apparently living at the time, he would have had to have driven 5 hours to go pick her up. Point number 2, she allegedly said that she spoke with a musician by the name of Benji Madden. He was the lead guitarist for Good Charlotte. Mr. Madden has been contacted by NBC and says that he was on tour in the Midwest during the time of the 2000 VMAs, and that can be corroborated. Number 3, images from that evening show Diddy and Jay-Z were at different events after the VMAs. Now, their whereabouts after that and throughout the whole evening are unknown. But here's where things, obviously, and I don't, I'm sure you guys have already pieced this together, but here's where things get really difficult from a prosecutor's perspective. Okay. The third item I think would be less troubling to me. Okay, well, they were pictured at different events. That doesn't, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Okay. The fact that they don't have photographs of the two of them together at a location that she says that they were at does not prove that they were never at that location. They may be able to prove that they were at different events, but they cannot prove that they were not at the event that she alleges they were at. I know that's a mouthful, but what I'm saying is that one troubles me the least. Item number 2, this idea about the mistake on whether or not she spoke to Benji Madden. It's not a central part of her story. It's not the most important part of her story, but it is something. It is a person that she identified. And this is what she had to say about it. She said, quote, honestly, what is the clearest is what's happened to me and the route that I took to what happened to me. Not all of the facts, all of the faces there are clear. So I made some mistakes. I may have made a mistake in identifying. That is a huge problem for the prosecution. And there is, by the way, just to be abundantly clear, there is no prosecution in this case. I'm saying for a prosecutor reviewing this, if they ever were contemplating bringing criminal charges in this case, that statement right there is nearly fatal. Because what she's saying is this whole case is about her identifying. The whole case is about her identifying the two individuals that assaulted her and a third individual who stood by and watched. And if she's having trouble identifying people, that's a problem. Now, people who've experienced this type of thing, I have no idea how their brains react to all of this. Maybe the people who actually assault you, you remember crystal clear because it's burned into your brain. But to make a statement such as, and this is her own statement, I may have made a mistake in identifying. She's already put that out there into the universe. Any attorney is going to use that statement against her again and again and again. And that's why these cases become incredibly difficult for the prosecution. But honestly, it was the last one, or the first one about her father that got me most of all, because that isn't something you're going to misidentify, your father. So either, well, quite frankly, here's the options. Either she's making it up. We just have to admit that. That is an option. I'm not saying she is or not. I'm saying that is a conclusion to come from all of this. Or she's misremembering her father being there, which again, I might be able to swallow the idea that celebrities and people you met for the first time you're going to have trouble with. I'm going to be able to remember the idea that perhaps you misidentified some of those people that evening or misremembered some things that evening, but you still remember exactly the person who attacked you. Okay, fine. But if the second option is that she misidentified her father, that's a huge problem. Or her father does not remember a 5-hour trip to go pick her up. And why would her father dime her out like that? I don't know. So again, this is just kind of a quick gut reaction, hot take on some of these cases that were in the news that I wanted to catch you guys up on. I think it's a really interesting juxtaposition between cases that have enough evidence to be criminally charged and cases that might not have enough evidence and may never have enough evidence to be criminally charged. We got just a couple of minutes left because I want to be able to hush up before we boot you guys over to the premiere with Joseph Scott Morgan tonight. And in those last couple of minutes, I'll take some questions if we have any, Kaylin. But I wanted to give a special shout out and thank you to some of our members, new members who've joined in the last week. That is Chorcell Lover, the Fellas Nana, Dragonfly, Perry, Roast Mac, Lorna McKenzie, Quantum Girl, La Mom James, love that, Trekking 360, Bella, Eslo, Libby 3. You guys are all fantastic. If you want to learn more about the membership program like these fine folks have, click on the join tab on your computer, not on your phone, unfortunately. On Friday, if you haven't checked it out already, we did our normal Friday episode of Courtroom Confidential where we caught up on all things throughout the week, especially Luigi Mangione, which we didn't have enough time to get into this evening, but some really interesting updates on that and some of my quick thoughts on that. We also talked a little bit about Jay-Z and Daniel Penny and some other cases. Stay tuned for Wednesday. We have our regular Wednesday night live, December 18th, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will be getting into all of these things. Love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me again this evening. Do not go anywhere. Sit tight. We're going to start that premiere in just a few hot seconds here. Oh, but before we do, Insomniac49 just became a YouTube member, and you are fantastic. So thank you so much. All right, you guys, you're all fantastic. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you all soon.